Hello, welcome to Phantom Homicide. Today, we're really going into some dark territory. We're diving deep into this truly unsettling intersection where organized crime, like the most brutal kind, meets some of the darkest spiritual beliefs imaginable.
Yeah, it's a chilling blend.
We're unpacking the, frankly, terrifying rise of this folk deity. Her followers, they're deep in what's called narcocultura, and they've allegedly, well, used human sacrifice to ask for things like incredible wealth, supernatural protection, and maybe the scariest thing of all, complete impunity, like getting away with anything.
Exactly. And what really stands out, what makes this so potent and frankly dangerous, is how a belief system that literally reveres death itself can become this incredibly effective tool
Cool for what?
for rationalizing just unspeakable brutality. We're talking about the absolute worst violence in the Mexican drug wars. It allows this extreme violence to almost masquerade as, some kind of divine mandate. And the crucial part for us, and for anyone listening, especially in the U.S., is tracking how these practices, these very specific, ritualized, violent practices that really solidified south of the border have started to, well, manifest. They're metastasizing, moving north.
Right. So our mission today with this deep dive is to use the sources we've gathered to really understand the history here.
Yeah.
Who is this entity, this Santa Muerte, the Holy Death? What's her story, her kind of dual identity? Because it seems complicated.
It is very...
And then we have to pivot. We need to look at the proof, the horrifying case files. We'll start with the confirmed ritual sacrifices in Sonora, Mexico from 2012. Just gut-wrenching stuff.
Confirmed.
And then we'll rewind, go back to 1989, to the case that really blew this whole thing open for many people, especially in the States, the seminal case of the murder of Mark Kilroy. That case just violently ripped the curtain back on this dark spiritual insurgency.
It was a benchmark case. It really put this phenomenon on the map in a way nothing had before.
Okay, so to even begin to understand the darkness, we need to understand the figure at the center of it all, Santa Muerte.
Right. First off, the name Santa Muerte. It translates literally from Spanish as holy death, saint death, essentially.
Holy death. It's already an unsettling combination.
It is, and she goes by several nicknames too, which kind of speaks to her familiarity among followers. You hear the Bony Lady La Huesuda, or Our Lady of Holy Death, Nuestra Señora de la Santa Muerte. Sometimes, almost affectionately, the white girl, La Niña Blanca.
And the image, what does she look like?
The common depiction is, well, it's instantly recognizable, and it's unsettlingly familiar because it borrows from other traditions. It's a robed skeleton, usually female, but sometimes presented as gender-neutral death.
Like the Grim Reaper?
Very much like the Grim Reaper, yeah. Holding a massive scythe, that classic symbol of death harvesting life, right? It's unavoidable. And often she'll also hold a globe, signifying her power over the whole world, or a set of scales.
Scales, like justice.
Exactly, representing her impartiality. She comes for everyone, rich, poor, good, bad. Death doesn't discriminate. That's part of her appeal, actually.
Okay, so she seems like this kind of folk Grim Reaper figure. But you mentioned earlier her roots are deeper.
Much deeper. And this is fascinating. This isn't some, New Age invention or a purely modern cult figure that just sprang up. Her origins, they trace back centuries, before the Spanish even arrived in the Americas.
Really? How far back?
We're talking Aztec civilization. The genesis of Santa Muerte connects directly to an Aztec goddess. Her name was Mictlantecuhtli.
Mictlantecuhtli. Okay, bit of a mouthful.
It is, but she was literally the Lady of the Dead, the Queen of Mictlan, the Aztec underworld. And guess what she looked like?
Let me guess. Skeletal.
Bingo. She was also depicted as a skeletal figure. She presided over the festivals they held to honor the dead, which, incidentally, evolved into the modern Day of the Dead celebrations. So this skeletal female deity of death has been part of the cultural consciousness in that region for a very, very long time.
Wow. So how did she survive the Spanish conquest? I mean, they tried to stamp out all the native religions, right? Call it paganism.
They absolutely did. The Catholic Church, the conquistadors, they were vehement about converting everyone and erasing the old gods. But these indigenous practices, especially those tied to fundamental things like death, they're incredibly resilient, especially in marginalized communities, the ones pushed to the fringes by the colonizers.
So they just went underground.
Exactly. This is where syncretism comes in. It's the blending of different belief systems. The devotion to Mictlantecuhtli, the Lady of the Dead, It was forced underground, but it didn't disappear. Over centuries, it slowly blended with European elements.
Like the Grim Reaper imagery you mentioned.
Precisely. The Grim Reaper was already a familiar figure in Spanish Catholic folk tradition, so the indigenous skeletal goddess found a kind of compatible image in the European Reaper. And it mixed with various forms of folk, Catholicism, prayers, candle magic, that sort of thing. It became this unique hybrid figure, surviving in secret, passed down through families or communities.
So this hidden devotion, it bubbles along for centuries. And then, when does it really explode into the modern cult we're talking about?
Well, the sources suggest the cult, in its more recognizable modern form, really started developing its structure maybe over the last half-century or so. But the real momentum, especially the link to illicit activities to crime, that gained serious traction in the late 1980s and particularly the early 1990s.
And is there a reason for that timing?
Absolutely. That period correlates almost directly with the explosion of the international narcotics trade, the rise of the major cartels.
Okay, so what's the connection? Why did drug traffickers specifically gravitate towards her?
It comes down to her unique selling point, her core characteristic. She's seen as amoral, non-judgmental.
Unlike the official Catholic saints.
Exactly. Think about it. The established Catholic saints, they generally demand virtue, repentance, following the rules, living a good life. But Santa Muerte, she doesn't care about that. She acts as this ultimate saint of last resort.
For who?
For the people on the margins. The ones who feel ignored or judged or outright condemned by the mainstream church and by the state. So the poor, the sick, the chronically unlucky, people in prison, and, crucially, criminals. Especially those involved in high-risk activities like drug trafficking. They feel the church won't help them or might even condemn them. But Santa Muerte, she'll listen.
So she offers help, but what's the catch?
It's purely transactional. There's no demand for moral purity. She offers this incredible promise of supernatural intervention, protection, good fortune, whatever you need, but you have to hold up your end of the bargain. Followers believe they must perform the correct rituals. They have to offer the proper sacrifices to gain her favor, and importantly, to keep it.
And what kind of things are people asking for? I mean, besides the obvious, like money or protection.
Well, this is where it gets really dark, and it underscores why she's so tied to the criminal element. When researchers looked at the prayers and petitions directed at Santa Muerte, the statistics are frankly chilling. Over half, more than 50% of the prayers directed at her include explicit requests to actively harm other people.
Harm them how?
Through curses, black magic, hexes, petitions for accidents, misfortune, illness, financial ruin, and yes, even death magic directed at enemies or rivals. She's not just a protector, she's seen as a potential spiritual weapon.
That's profoundly disturbing. A saint people pray to for hurting others.
It is, but, and this is crucial for balance, we absolutely have to emphasize the counterpoint.
Okay, what's that?
The vast majority of Santa Muerte followers are not criminals asking for curses. Most are benign. They're often poor, maybe less educated, often quite superstitious people who simply view her as an unofficial, unsanctioned saint within their own kind of folk Catholic worldview.
So just another helper figure.
Yeah, maybe a more approachable one, or one they feel understands their struggles better than the distant figures in the official church. They see her as a source of comfort, healing, maybe help finding a job or protecting their family. They might see her as a faster, more direct line for help than navigating the perceived bureaucracy of the established church. For them, she's not a symbol of evil or violence at all.
So there's this huge split between the sort of everyday folk follower and this darker criminal element using her for nefarious purposes.
A massive split. But it's the darker side, obviously, that draws the most attention and condemnation.
And what has been the official response from, say, the Catholic Church?
Total condemnation, unequivocal. The Catholic Church, including statements from the Vatican, considers the worship of Santa Muerte to be heretical. They've called it satanic, blasphemous, and fundamentally incompatible with Christian doctrine.
Have they said why, specifically?
Yeah, they emphasize that death is an event, a passage, not a conscious entity to be worshipped. Worshipping death itself is seen as perverse, and they constantly reiterate. She's not a canonized saint recognized by the church and never will be. Associating her with sainthood is seen as dangerous syncretism that leads people astray.
So it's a spiritual battle line drawn in the sand.
Absolutely. In that spiritual conflict, it didn't just stay in the realm of theological debate. It became physical. It became military.
What do you mean?
This conflict escalated dramatically, very visibly, back in 2009. The Mexican army got directly involved.
The army. Against shrines.
Yes, they went out and destroyed roughly 3 dozen Santa Muerte shrines, particularly targeting the prominent ones located near the U.S. border, places like Tijuana and Nuevo Laredo. These weren't small hidden altars, some were quite elaborate public structures.
Why would the army do that? Isn't that a religious freedom issue?
Well, the justification was explicit. Military command described it openly as part of a psychological war on narcoculture. They weren't just tearing down statues, they were sending a message. The state recognized how deeply entangled the image and worship of Santa Muerte had become with the cartels, with the violence. Destroying the shrines was a highly symbolic act aimed at dismantling the spiritual infrastructure, or at least the perceived spiritual infrastructure, of the drug traffickers. It was a direct challenge to the narcos' chosen protector.
Wow. So the government saw her as an enemy combatant almost.
In a psychological sense, yes. They saw her symbolism as empowering the cartels and aimed to break that link in the public mind.
Okay, so we've got this ancient figure, syncretized, popular with many ordinary folks, but also condemned by the church and now targeted by the military because of this link to narcocultura. Let's zoom in on that specific radicalized wing, the criminalized extreme.
Right. This is what some researchers call the narcocultura variant. And we need to be clear, while it's definitely a minority of her total followers, it's a sizable minority. And crucially, this is the group that acts as the spiritual engine driving the extreme criminality, the horrific violence, and the completely morally corrupt behaviors that terrorize the borderlands and beyond.
So how is this variant different? What do they believe?
This is where the core ideas of the faith get twisted, completely warped, to justify utter depravity. This specific belief system doesn't just tolerate crime, it actively rewards personal gain achieved through any means necessary. It openly endorses the intentional infliction of pain and suffering on enemies.
It endorses suffering.
Yes. And for its most hardcore adherents, the act of killing itself can be viewed as pleasurable or even as a divinely mandated duty. It's a complete inversion, a total rejection of traditional Judeo-Christian morality. Anything goes if it serves your purpose and pleases the saint.
And you mentioned the timing earlier, linking her rise to the drug trade boom. Was there another key moment?
There was. The connection between Santa Muerte and the cartels, especially the most violent ones, intensified dramatically around 2006.
What happened in 2006?
That's when Mexico's then president, Felipe Calderón, declared an all-out war against the drug cartels. He deployed the military in huge numbers. This decision massively ramped up the violence on all sides.
And how did that affect Santa Muerte worship?
Think about the psychological impact on the people doing the fighting, especially the low-level cartel foot soldiers, the sicarios. Suddenly, they're facing brutal, imminent death on a daily basis. Constant shootouts, ambushes, torture if captured. Their mortality is right there, staring them in the face.
So death becomes very real.
Extremely real. And in that environment, the very act of worshiping death itself, personified as Santa Muerte, becomes almost a psychological necessity. It's like trying to make friends with the inevitable, with the grim reoppressor self. If you're going to die violently, maybe you can get the goddess of death on your side first.
What are they asking her for in that context?
It becomes very primal. She offers this transactional contract, but the stakes are life and death. Their motives become starkly clear. Number one, protection from harm. Keep me alive through this firefight. Protect me from bullets. Make me invisible to the police or the rival cartel.
Okay, protection.
What else? If protection fails, they might ask for a good death, meaning quick, maybe glorious in battle, definitely not capture and torture. They petition constantly for the death of their enemies, rivals, police, informants. And of course, woven through it all is the desire to enjoy the spoils. The phenomenal riches that come from the trade, and the power that comes from cultivating a fearsome, terrifying reputation. That reputation itself is a form of protection.
So the violence fuels the devotion, and the devotion fuels the violence.
It's a vicious feedback loop. And as the stakes get higher, as the crimes get bigger and bloodier, the demands placed on the followers by the saint, or at least their interpretation of her demands, also escalate.
Oh, so what kind of escalation?
This is where the offerings shift dramatically. When a cartel boss is asking for, say, magical protection for a massive drug shipment worth millions, or demanding the death of a powerful rival leader or a high-ranking police chief, well, an offering of tequila and cigars might not cut it anymore.
So they need something more potent.
Exactly. The offerings become primeval, barbaric. We start seeing demands for blood. Animal blood initially, maybe chickens or goats, sacrificed at the altar. But in the most extreme instances, the ones we're focusing on, the demand escalates to human life.
Human sacrifice.
Yes. And sometimes it's not just the life, but specific parts. In some documented cases, the heads of victims and presumably the souls residing within them have been used as incredibly potent offerings, placed on the altar to invoke the most powerful divine protection or offensive magic.
It's like the greater the crime they want to commit or get away with, the greater the spiritual price they believe they have to pay.
That seems to be the logic. It's a terrifying spiritual arms race.
So it makes sense then why she's often called the matron saint of the Mexican drug war.
It's an accurate label, absolutely. But here's a critical nuance, something that people outside the conflict often miss, and it's really mind-bending.
What's that?
She's petitioned by both sides.
Both sides, you mean?
Yeah.
Not just the criminals.
Correct. It's not just the narcos, the traffickers, the assassins praying to her. Her devotees also include the very people who are sworn to fight the cartels.
Like who? Police.
The soldiers.
Yes. Police officers working in dangerous cities, prison guards trying to survive inside cartel-controlled prisons, soldiers on patrol in conflict zones, even some lawyers who deal with cartel cases. All these people also face the threat of imminent, violent death every single day.
So they're praying to the same saint as the people trying to kill them.
Precisely. They're all asking the Grim Reapress, Santa Muerte, for the same fundamental thing. More time, more sand in the hourglass of life. Protect me, let me see my family again tonight. It's a stunning example of cognitive dissonance playing out on a massive spiritual scale. Both sides appealing to the same power that represents the very thing they're fighting over and dying from. That's incredibly complex. And it must make things very confusing for investigators trying to understand a crime scene.
Absolutely. Especially when violence moves beyond the purely tactical into the realm of the ritualistic. This is where law enforcement, particularly agencies like the FBI who've studied this, have developed frameworks to try and make sense of it. They distinguish between what they call inspired actions and true ritualized actions.
Okay, explain that distinction.
Yeah.
Inspired versus ritualized.
Sure. Inspired actions are basically utilitarian, even if they look gruesome. They draw on cultural behaviors, maybe something seen in a movie, or common cartel tactics, but they're performed mainly to achieve a secular effect.
Like what?
Like producing terror in the community, or sending a graphic message to a rival gang. Think of hanging bodies from bridges. Horrific, yes, but the primary goal is intimidation, not necessarily fulfilling a specific religious requirement. These actions are not usually part of a coherent, required symbol system.
Okay, so that's inspired. What about ritualized?
Ritualized actions are different. These are driven primarily by the actor's specific beliefs, their perceptions of what a higher power demands, or sometimes even their own neuroses. Crucially, these actions are seen as required by a cultural or community symbol system.
Like the narco-cultura version of Santa Muerte worship.
Exactly. The act isn't just for show, it's part of a larger, coherent system of interconnected rituals that are believed necessary to achieve specific, desired spiritual results, like gaining that magical protection, ensuring vengeance, or fulfilling a pact with the deity. The really dark forms of Santa Muerte devotion, especially those involving sacrifice, fall squarely into this ritualized category.
And these rituals, they have specific rules.
Oh, absolutely. The belief system, especially in its more intense forms, is incredibly complex and demanding. Adherents often believe Santa Muerte is highly jealous and intensely vengeful.
Jealous and vengeful.
Yes. Which means the rituals, the prayers, the offerings, they have to be done perfectly, meticulously. According to the prescribed rules, if you mess up, if you show disrespect or don't fulfill your promise to her, you risk incurring her divine wrath.
So fear is a big motivator.
Huge. Fear of the saint turning against you is a powerful force compelling them to extreme precision, even in their violence. The ceremonies themselves are often quite elaborate. They involve specific types of candle magic, herbs, oils, amulets, statues.
You see those candles in photos sometimes?
Sure.
Different colors. Do the colors mean something?
They're critical. The color symbolism is key to understanding the intent of the ritual. Investigators rely heavily on this color coding when they find an altar at a crime scene or suspect's home. Our sources lay out the common meanings, and it's pretty consistent.
Okay, give me some examples.
All right. Black is almost always about power, specifically power against enemies. Think vengeance, curses, breaking hexes, or seeking protection from attack. Black candles are a red flag for investigators.
What about other colors? Red.
Red is pretty universal across folk magic traditions. It's for love, passion, relationships, attraction. Gold or yellow is usually about money, business success, trying to attain wealth.
Okay. Any others?
Bone color, or white, is often for peace, harmony, cleansing, or general spiritual protection. Blue can relate to studies or concentration. Green is interesting, often used for justice, legal matters, or overcoming injustice. So seeing green candles might suggest someone is dealing with court cases or feeling wronged.
So the colors tell a story about what the person was asking for.
Precisely. But again, in the extreme criminalized forms, the rituals go way beyond just candles and herbs. That's when you enter the territory of blood offerings and blood packs.
Blood packs. Seriously.
Yes. Investigators have found altars with bowls containing animal blood, sometimes even human blood, placed directly before the Santa Muerte statue. In some of the most graphic discoveries, blood has been smeared onto the religious icons themselves, or even smeared onto the devotee's body as part of a ritual to forge a permanent physical pact with the saint, usually demanding unwavering protection in exchange for loyalty and often further violent service.
That's intense. It sounds like a full-blown radicalized faith.
It can be. And this radicalization wasn't always hidden. There were figures actively pushing it into the open, like a man named Romo Guillen.
Who is he?
He presented himself as a sort of high priest or bishop of Santa Muerte. He gained notoriety around 2009, just before he was arrested in 2010, ironically, on kidnapping charges.
What did he do?
He was escalating the rhetoric to a really terrifying degree. He was reportedly calling for, essentially, a holy war, a literal holy war against the Catholic Church, which he saw as the enemy. That kind of public call to arms signals a complete ideological break, a militant spiritual posture that's incredibly dangerous when mixed with organized crime.
Okay, so we have the theory, the framework, the colors, the blood packs. Let's get into the confirmed reality. You mentioned the Sonora case from 2012. You said this was the first confirmed instance of human sacrifice done specifically for Santa Muerte in Mexico.
That's correct. While the Kilroy case, which we'll get to, involved horrific rituals and influenced the perception, its roots were more complex, tied heavily to Palo Mayombe. The Sonora case was different. This was Santa Muerte explicitly as the recipient of human sacrifice. It was a terrifying pivot point. The alleged threat became documented, undeniable reality.
Where exactly did this happen?
This unfolded in a town called Nacozari de Garcia in the state of Sonora. And its location is significant. It's only about 110 kilometers, maybe 70 miles south of Douglas, Arizona, so very close to the U.S. border.
And how did it come to light?
The investigation started in March 2012. It began, as these things sometimes do, with a missing person report. A 10-year-old boy, Jesus Octavio Martinez Yanez, was reported missing by his stepfather on March 6th. Just seemed like a tragic, but perhaps routine disappearance at first.
But it wasn't routine.
Not at all. Local authorities pretty quickly linked the boy's disappearance to rumors about a local cult, a group known in the area as La Santa Muerta, centered around a woman named Sylvia Meraz.
So they suspected foul play linked to this cult.
Yes, and when the forensic investigation concluded, when they found the remains and pieced together the evidence, the full horror was revealed. It wasn't just the one boy. 3 victims had been murdered and sacrificed.
3. Who were they?
2 were 10-year-old boys, including Jesus Martinez Yanez, and the 3rd victim was a 55-year-old woman named Cleotilde Romero Pacheco.
2 children and an adult woman. Was this random? A crime of passion?
No, the evidence pointed clearly away from that. This wasn't about passion or convenience. The victims were sacrifices, offered up as part of an ongoing religious requirement for the cult.
An ongoing requirement. How do they know that?
Because the killings took place sequentially over a period of 3 years, it indicated a planned ritual schedule. The first victim, likely the woman, was killed sometime in 2009. The second victim, the other 10-year-old boy, Martin Rios Chaparro, was killed in 2010. And the last, Jesus Martinez Yanez, was killed just before his disappearance was reported in March 2012.
So like an annual sacrifice.
It suggests something like that, a pattern of mandated recurring offerings, perhaps to maintain the staff's favor or petition for ongoing protection or wealth for the cult members.
Okay, and the method?
Yeah.
How were they killed? The sources mentioned chilling details.
They did. The spokesman for the Sonora State Prosecutor's Office at the time, Jose Larinaga, described it publicly. And it's barbaric. It speaks directly to the demands of this radicalized worship. The murders took place at night, likely at the cult's altar site, illuminated only by candles.
Okay.
The victims had their throats slit. Cuts were also made on their wrists, standard, horrific ways to kill someone. But then came the truly chilling detail, the part that screamed ritual.
What was it?
Larinaga stated, and I'm quoting the essence of his report here, they sliced open the victim's veins, and while they were still alive, they waited for them to bleed to death and collected the blood in a container.
Oh my God. They collected the blood while they were still alive.
Yes, this wasn't just about killing them. It was about the process. It was about ensuring the offering the blood was as potent as possible, spiritually charged by capturing the life force, the essence, while the victim was still conscious, still living. It's a horrifying concept drawn from ancient sacrificial practices.
And what did they do with the blood?
The purpose, as indicated by the crime scene, was purely ritualistic dedication. That collected blood, the life force, was then poured around the massive altar the cult had built to Santa Muerte. Forensic experts examined the site and found blood traces spread over an astonishing 30 square meters. That's over 300 square feet around this altar.
An overwhelming offering.
Exactly. Designed to placate the saint, empower her, or maybe fulfill a pact demanding such extreme sacrifice in return for favors like money and protection, which the suspects later confessed was their motivation.
Who were the suspects? You mentioned Sylvia Meraz.
Yes. 8 people were arrested initially. Sylvia Meraz Moreno and her son, Ramon Omar Palacios Meraz, were identified as the leaders, the ones who allegedly carried out the actual killings.
Did they confess?
Meraz offered a partial, somewhat fragmented confession. When asked about the adult female victim, Cleotilde Romero, she reportedly said, "We all agreed to do it. Supposedly she was a witch or something." It was an attempt at justification, painting the victim as somehow deserving.
But what about the boys?
That's the disturbing part. She apparently did not respond to questions about why the 2 10-year-old boys were killed. No justification offered there.
And the other cult members?
The range of suspects really showed how deeply this cult had infiltrated the local community, or at least this extended family. They ranged in age from a 15-year-old girl up to Sylvia Meraz herself, who was 44. Many of them were relatives. Sylvia's father, her boyfriend, her son. It was essentially a family enterprise built around human sacrifice.
A family enterprise. That's just horrifying. And this was the first confirmed case tied directly to Santa Muerte.
In Mexico, yes. The first time authorities felt they had undeniable proof confessions, physical evidence linking the sacrifices directly to petitions made to Santa Muerte for specific benefits. It sent shockwaves through Mexico and across the border.
Okay, from that chilling confirmation in 2012, let's rewind. Let's go back to the case that, for many people, especially in the U.S., became the defining image of this kind of borderland horror, even if the specific religious ties were complex. The murder of Mark Kilroy in 1989.
Yes, this case is absolutely seminal. It burned itself into the public consciousness. We really need to unpack the details here because it laid out the blueprint for understanding this deadly intersection of organized crime, extreme violence, and dark folk religion decades ago.
So set the scene. Who was Mark Kilroy?
Mark James Kilroy was, by all accounts, a really good kid. He was 21 years old, a pre-med student at the University of Texas in Austin. He was an honors student, came from a good family in Santa Fe, Texas, raised Catholic, just seemed like a bright young man with a future.
And he was on spring break.
Exactly. Like thousands of other American college students back then, he and his friends went down to Matamoros, Tamaulipas, right across the border from Brownsville, Texas, for spring break. This was March 1989. Matamoros was famous, or infamous, for its bars and, shall we say, more relaxed drinking laws compared to Texas.
A typical spring break destination.
Very typical. The night he disappeared, March 14th, the streets were packed. Sources estimate maybe 15,000 tourists, mostly American students, were partying in the downtown bar district, just a massive crowd.
How did he get separated?
He and 3 friends had been bar hopping. As they left one bar, heading towards the International Bridge to walk back to Brownsville, one of his friends stopped to urinate in an alleyway. Mark waited near the street. When the friend came back just moments later, Mark was gone.
Just vanished in that crowd.
Vanished. Later investigation revealed what happened. He was apparently approached, lured towards a truck. Then a second vehicle intercepted him. He was grabbed, subdued at gunpoint, and forced into a vehicle. All incredibly fast, right there in a busy street, while his friend was literally steps away. He just disappeared into the night.
What happened next? The search.
Initially, it was treated as a missing person case, maybe a robbery gone wrong, which sadly wasn't uncommon. But this case had a key difference. Mark Kilroy's uncle, Owen Kilroy, was a U.S. Customs Service agent.
Ah, so law enforcement connections.
Right. That connection immediately elevated the case. It put immense pressure on both U.S. and Mexican authorities. The family was relentless. The media attention became intense, international. It wasn't just another tourist who got rolled. This became a major incident demanding serious resources.
So who was behind it? Who are the architects of this horror?
The central figure, the mastermind, the spiritual guide, the puppet master, he was known as Adolfo Constanzo, chillingly nicknamed El Padrino, the Godfather.
Costanzo. What was his story?
He was a fascinating, terrifying figure. Cuban-American, born in Miami, reportedly very charismatic, handsome. He was actually a former male model. He moved to Mexico City around 1984 and initially set himself up as a tarot card reader, a fortune teller, a kind of urban shaman.
And people bought it.
Oh, yeah. He developed this reputation for uncanny accuracy, for predicting the future, for offering powerful magical protection. This quickly attracted a very high-flying, dangerous clientele. Wealthy drug dealers, famous musicians, corrupt high-ranking police officers, they flocked to him for spiritual services.
What was his actual spiritual background? Was it Santa Muerte?
Not primarily, no. This is where the nuance comes in. Constanzo was deeply involved in and trained in Palomayambe.
Palomayambe. What's that?
It's a complex Afro-Caribbean religion originating in the Congo region of Africa, brought over with the slave trade. It centers on venerating and communing with the spirits of the dead, often through rituals involving animal sacrifice and the use of a sacred cauldron called an Ganga. Constanzo blended this with other folk magic and occult beliefs. He reportedly believed his mother thought he had psychic powers from a young age, and he fully leaned into cultivating this image of dark power.
And his philosophy, what drove him?
Utterly cold, cynical self-interest. His reported philosophy was basically, let the non-believers, the sheep, kill themselves with drugs and vice, while he, the enlightened one, would profit immensely by selling protection and spiritual services to the criminals who preyed on them. Pure parasitic opportunism cloaked in spirituality.
Who was helping him? He couldn't have done this alone.
His chief accomplice, his high priestess, and his main recruiter was a woman named Sarah Aldrete. And she represents this really terrifying aspect of sophisticated infiltration, of hiding darkness behind a normal facade.
Oh, so what was her deal?
Sarah Aldrete was a native of Matamoros, but she was also, almost unbelievably, an honor student and a popular cheerleader at Texas Southmost College, right across the border in Brownsville. She lived a double life.
An honor student and cheerleader involved in this.
Yes. Investigators believe Constanzo used her deliberately. Her clean-cut image, her attractiveness, her seeming normalcy and charm, they were tools to lure potential victims, especially men, and to maintain the cult's social facade, recruiting new members.
How did she recruit people? How did she convince them to join something so dark?
One chilling detail reported was her method of indoctrination. She would allegedly show potential recruits the 1987 thriller movie The Believers.
The Martin Sheen movie about ritual sacrifice in New York.
That's the one. It's specifically about a cult performing human sacrifices to gain wealth and influence. Aldrete reportedly showed this film over and over again to members, normalizing the idea, hammering home the connection. Sacrifice equals power.
Okay, so we have Constanzo the Godfather and Aldrete the Godmother recruiter. Where did they operate?
Their main base of operations, where the sacrifices took place, was a remote ranch called Rancho Santa Elena, located outside Matamoros.
Who owned the ranch?
It was initially owned by a man named Brigido Hernandez, but the key figures who became Constanzo's main disciples and financiers were members of the Hernandez family involved in drug smuggling. Particularly Elio Hernandez Rivera, his brother Serafin Hernandez Garcia Sr., and their nephew Ovidio Hernandez Rivera.
How did they get so deeply involved with Constanzo?
The story goes that their commitment solidified after a drug-related shooting incident. They believed Constanzo's magic had protected them, saved their lives. As payment, and for ongoing protection, they allegedly offered Constanzo half of their substantial drug smuggling proceeds. It became a formal business arrangement: drugs for magic, money for supernatural immunity. Constanzo also provided them with his network of corrupt police contacts.
So why Mark Kilroy? Was he just randomly grabbed?
Not entirely random in type, though random as an individual. Constanzo had apparently decided they needed a specific kind of sacrifice for a particularly powerful ritual. He explicitly ordered his followers to go out and find a white Anglo male, preferably a student, someone seen as clean or potent.
Why that specific profile?
The belief, likely rooted in racist or colonial-era magic notions, was that sacrificing someone like Kilroy, an outsider, educated, perceived as pure in some twisted way, would yield greater power. Constanzo specifically promised the Hernandez family that this sacrifice, the sacrifice of the American student, would grant them literal immunity, make them invisible to law enforcement for their drug smuggling operations. Kilroy was targeted to become the ultimate magical shield.
Okay, so what happened to Mark at the ranch? The details are horrific, right?
Pure, sustained horror. He was held overnight. The sources indicate he was tortured, ritually abused, and sodomized for hours before being killed.
How was he killed?
Constanzo himself reportedly delivered the killing blow in the machete, a single heavy blow to the back of the neck or head.
And then the mutilation. Why was that done?
The mutilation was driven by the specific requirements of their palo mayombe and occult practices. It wasn't random brutality. It had ritual purpose. His legs were amputated at the knees. The reported reason was pragmatic to simplify burial.
But there was more, wasn't there? Something about his spine.
Yes. This is incredibly macabre. A wire was apparently inserted through his spinal column, the purpose, so that his vertebrae, his bones, could be easily fished out of the ground later.
Retrieved later. Why?
It strongly suggests the intent wasn't just to dispose of the body, but to incorporate his physical remains into future ritual workings, to continue harvesting his spiritual power, his essence, long after his death. His bones would likely have become ritual objects, maybe added to the gunga.
The gunga, the cauldron. Tell us about that.
The gunga is central to palo mayombe. It's typically a large iron pot or cauldron. It serves as a miniature cemetery, a focal point for communing with the spirits of the dead. It's consecrated, fed with offerings, animal blood, rum, cigars, herbs, and crucially, human remains.
Human remains, like Kilroy's.
Exactly. They believe the spirit of the deceased, especially a powerful sacrifice, could be bound to the gunga, and its power harnessed by the practitioner. In Kilroy's case, the most grotesque detail emerged. His brain was removed.
Removed? For what?
It was reportedly boiled in the nunga, mixed with other ingredients. The idea was to literally consume or absorb his intelligence, his spirit, his power, adding it to the collective magical shield protecting the cult.
What did investigators find inside the gunga when they raided the ranch?
The contents confirmed the horrifying ritual accounts. Inside this pot, they found human brain matter mixed with a gruesome stew of symbolic items. A goat's head, chicken feet, a sea turtle, various herbs, a horseshoe for luck, coins, and residue of animal blood. It was a witch's brew designed for maximum perceived magical effect.
The media at the time jumped on this, right? Called Satanism, cannibalism.
They did. The press coverage was sensationalized. They immediately labeled it satanic, which it wasn't accurate. It was palo mayombe-based syncretic magic. They also widely reported claims of cannibalism, which investigators later largely debunked. While the brain was boiled, the primary ritual focus seemed to be on harnessing spiritual power through the nunga and mutilation, not necessarily on consuming flesh in the way cannibalism usually implies. The media often missed the wider context of drug violence and the specific religious beliefs involved.
So how did the police finally break the case? How did they find the ranch?
It was almost an accident, a stroke of luck or fate. On April 1st, 1989, weeks after Kilroy vanished, Mexican federal police patrolling near the border spotted a truck that seemed to deliberately avoid their checkpoint.
They ran the checkpoint.
Yes, the police pursued it. The truck led them directly back to the isolated Santa Elena ranch. That minor traffic violation was the thread that unraveled the entire horrific operation.
What happened at the ranch?
Initially, the police were just investigating the suspicious vehicle and possible drug activity. They detained the people there, including the ranch caretaker. During questioning, possibly under pressure, the caretaker was shown a photo of Mark Kilroy. He recognized him, identified him.
And then the confession started.
Yes. One of the main cult members, Serafin Hernandez Garcia, cracked under interrogation. He confessed to the series of killings at the ranch, stating explicitly that they were ritual sacrifices ordered by Constanzo to provide magical protection for their drug smuggling.
And that led to the discovery of the bodies.
The truly gruesome discovery came on April 11th. The arrested cult members were forced to show the police where the bodies were buried. They started digging, and they kept digging.
How many were there?
They unearthed 15 mutilated bodies in shallow graves around the ranch, all male. Forensic analysis indicated they had been killed over the previous 9 months.
15 victims. Was Kilroy the only random tourist?
Yes. While Kilroy's abduction was what brought the intense international spotlight, the investigation revealed that most of the other 14 victims were rival drug dealers or other individuals connected to the underworld. They were likely killed as sacrifices to eliminate competition and enhance Constanzo's magical power and fearsome reputation. Kilroy was the outlier, the special sacrifice.
Did they find Kilroy's body among them?
They did. His remains were identified through dental records. The horror was confirmed.
You mentioned the cult members believed they had authority to kill.
Yes. Some, like Elio Hernandez Rivera, were considered ordained executioners within the cult. They even displayed ritual scars, reportedly arrow-like shapes burned or cut into their skin with a hot blade which Constanzo had given them. These marks signified their spiritual authority, granted by him to perform human sacrifice.
What happened to Constanzo and Aldrete? Did they get caught at the ranch?
No, they had already fled. Once they realized the police were closing in after the checkpoint incident, Constanzo, Aldrete, and a few core followers escaped to Mexico City.
So a manhunt began.
A massive manhunt. Police raided Constanzo's properties in Mexico City, apartments, businesses. They found more evidence, piles of violent homosexual pornography, which seemed to be another element of his psychological control or ritual practice, and more hidden altars.
Did they link him to other crimes?
Yes. The investigation started connecting the Matamoros killings to a string of unsolved, often bizarre murders that had occurred in and around Mexico City between 1987 and 1989. The pattern of ritualistic elements began to emerge. Police also reportedly took the extreme step of burning down the main ritual shack at Rancho San Elena, a psychological tactic, hoping to symbolically destroy Constanzo's power base and break his spirit.
How did it end? How did they finally catch him?
The dramatic climax came on May 6, 1989. Police tracked Constanzo and his remaining inner circle, including Aldrete, Martin Quintana Rodriguez, and Alvaro de Leon Valdez, El Dubi, to an upscale apartment building in Mexico City. They surrounded the apartment.
Did he surrender?
Far from it. Constanzo, realizing he was trapped, reacted with defiance and maybe a final desperate ritual act. He ordered his followers to open fire on the police below. He reportedly started throwing handfuls of gold coins and paper money out the window, perhaps a final offering or a gesture of contempt. Inside, he was apparently frantically burning more money on the stove.
Man.
As police closed in, breaching the apartment, Constanzo made his final move. Facing capture, enraged, and perhaps terrified of what awaited him, he gave a final order. He commanded Alvaro de Leon Valdez, El Dubi, one of his most loyal followers, to kill him and Martin Quintana Rodriguez.
He ordered his own death.
Yes. El Dubi obeyed. He machine-gunned Constanzo and Quintana to death inside a closet. Constanzo chose death by proxy over facing justice or capture.
What about Aldrete?
Aldrete was arrested at the scene, along with El Dubi and another surviving member. She immediately started trying to distance herself, claiming she was unaware of the killings, that she was essentially Constanzo's prisoner held against her will. A claim few believed, given the evidence of her active role as recruiter and priestess.
What was the aftermath? The legacy?
Well, as we discussed, the media frenzy cemented this image of satanic drug cults on the border, often overlooking the specific Palo Mayombe roots and the broader context of cartel violence. But the Kilroy case had a profound, lasting impact.
How so?
Mark Kilroy's parents, Jim and Helen Kilroy, showed incredible strength. They channeled their grief into action, founding the Mark Kilroy Foundation. Its mission became drug awareness and prevention education, particularly aimed at young people. They funded programs, promoted the Just Say No message, and worked tirelessly to warn other students and tourists about the potential dangers, advising them always to stay in groups. They turned personal tragedy into a public service campaign.
And the criminals? What happened to Aldrete and the others?
They faced justice in Mexico. Sarah Aldrete was eventually sentenced to 62 years in prison. Other key members, like Elio Hernandez and Serafin Hernandez Garcia, received sentences up to 67 years, though these were later reduced due to sentencing laws, capping at Mexico's maximum of 50 years for capital murder at the time. El Dubi, the triggerman who killed Constanzo, also received a long sentence. A couple of suspects, Ovidio Hernandez and another man named Ponce Torres, reportedly remain at large even today. But overall, it marked a rare instance, especially back then, of significant judicial consequences for this kind of occult-linked cartel criminality.
So the Kilroy case, even with its Palo Mayombe core, really set this violent template in the public mind. It established that link. Ritual sacrifice as a tool for power and protection in the drug world. Did we see Santa Muerte followers explicitly adopt this model later?
Absolutely. The narco-cultura variant of Santa Muerte worship seemed to absorb and then accelerate this transactional model of violence for power. In the years following Kilroy, we see a clear, disturbing pattern emerging across Mexico of extreme violence being offered up explicitly as a spiritual exchange to Santa Muerte.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. The sources document several chilling instances. In 2004, in Mexico City, authorities arrested a leader of a powerful car theft ring. He confessed to ritually killing virgins and babies once a year.
Virgins and babies, why?
He claimed these were sacrifices specifically to Santa Muerte, believing that the purity or innocence of the victims yielded the most potent magical protection for his criminal activities. It reflects that horrifying belief in a hierarchy of sacrifice.
Okay, what else?
In 2008, in Nuevo Laredo, a city ravaged by cartel war, enforcers from the Gulf Cartel were reportedly executing captured members of the rival Sinaloa cartel directly at public Santa Muerte shrines. The executions themselves were framed as offerings, dedicating the deaths of their enemies to the saint for favor and dominance.
So the murder site itself became an altar.
Effectively, yes. Then look at Ciudad Juarez, another epicenter of violence, around 2009-2010. Authorities found several crime scenes strongly suggesting ritual killings. In one case, they found remnants of an altar near a body with the words Santa Muerte and the plea Cuidanos Flaquita, take care of us, skinny, spray painted nearby, a direct appeal for protection linked to the murder.
Any other Juarez examples?
Yes, another victim was found burned behind a house that contained a Santa Muerte altar. Investigators linked the killers to the local Hillside 13 gang, their reported motive. They were asking Santa Muerte for help and protection while attempting to pull off something big, likely a major crime. Again, ritualized violence tied to a specific criminal petition.
It seems some cartels embraced her more than others.
Definitely. Perhaps the most notorious embrace came from Los Zetas. Originally the enforcement wing of the Gulf Cartel, they became infamous for their extreme brutality. Los Zetas widely adopted Santa Muerte as their patron saint.
How do we know that?
Many captured Zetas members have prominent Santa Muerte tattoos, and their actions often bore ritualistic hallmarks. In 2010, near Camargo and Miguel Alemán, also close to the Texas border, Zetas members tortured and decapitated victims, carved the letter Z into their bodies, and then placed the severed heads on the roof of a desecrated chapel. A clear spiritual message delivered through macabre public display.
That's beyond just killing enemies. That's ritual terror.
Absolutely. And it continued. Later that same year, 2010, down in Cancun, a tourist area, 6 bodies were found dumped in a cenote, a natural cave sinkhole, often considered sacred. They had been tortured. 3 of them had their hearts crudely cut out, and again the letter Z was carved into their chests.
Hearts cut out. That echoes ancient Aztec sacrifice.
It certainly evokes that imagery. We also have documentation from various regions of other extreme acts committed by cartel members who were known Santa Muerte devotees. Victims being castrated, being beheaded while still alive, being burned to death, systematically butchered like animals, quartered.
Just pure savagery.
Utter savagery. And in some truly bizarre and horrific cases, authorities have found only the victim's skin remaining.
Just the skin.
Yes. Now, it's hard to say definitively if this is purely the act of secular psychopaths expressing rage, or if it holds a specific spiritual meaning. But it does raise profound and disturbing historical questions. Does this echo the ancient Aztec rituals associated with the god Totec, our Lord the Flayed One, where priests wore the skins of sacrificed victims? We don't know for sure, but the possibility that these modern acts tap into such ancient, dark ritual currents is deeply unsettling. The level of ritualized depravity is undeniable, regardless of the specific historical echo.
Okay, so this tide of criminalized, ritualistic Santa Muerte devotion is surging in Mexico. The inevitable question then becomes, does it cross the border?
That has been the central concern for U.S. law enforcement for years. Given the deep penetration of Mexican cartels into the United States, the worry was that these spiritually motivated killings, whether inspired or truly ritualized, would inevitably follow the drug routes north.
And has that happened? Have there been confirmed cases in the U.S.?
Unfortunately, yes. The sources we reviewed confirm that this threat has materialized. We have documented incidents across multiple states involving Santa Muerte elements linked to extreme violence.
Where? Can you give examples?
Let's start in South Texas, near the border, between 2005 and 2006. This involves Gabriel Cardona Ramirez, who admitted to being a kill team leader for Los Zetas, operating in Laredo, Texas.
What did you do?
In conversations intercepted by the DEA, Cardona chillingly detailed a ritualistic act. He bragged about capturing 2 rival teenage drug dealers. He personally slashed them with a broken bottle specifically to draw blood. He then collected their blood in a cup, made a literal toast obrenis to Santísima Muerte, asking for her blessing and protection. After this ritual toast, he proceeded to have the teenagers executed and their bodies dissolved in barrels of acid or lye. Yes, a horrific disposal method the cartels sometimes call a guiso, Literally a stew. In Cardona's account, the ritual toast with the victim's blood came before the disposal. It fused ritual petition with brutal murder and erasure.
That's Texas.
Anywhere else?
Arizona. In October 2010, there was a significant case in Chandler, Arizona, a suburb of Phoenix. A man named Martin Alejandro Cotamonroy, known as Jondo, was targeted by a cartel kill team because he had allegedly stolen a large quantity of marijuana from them.
What happened to him?
He was violently stabbed and then beheaded. The gruesome nature of the crime got attention, but what was particularly noted in the official police report was the presence of Santa Muerte items at the crime scene. Specifically, burning candles and a small statue or picture of Santa Muerte were found near where the murder took place.
Suggesting a connection.
It strongly suggests a spiritual component was present. Perhaps the killers were petitioning for protection during the act, or offering the death as payment, or seeking success in retrieving their stolen drugs. The artifacts pointed to a ritualistic undertone beyond a simple revenge killing. Has this spread further inland, away from the border?
Yes, demonstrating the national reach of these groups and potentially their beliefs. In Chicago, Illinois, back in April 2011, local law enforcement reported identifying multiple suspects involved in about a dozen separate killings as being followers of Santa Muerte.
How do they know?
They found shrines dedicated to Santa Muerte in the suspects' homes during raids. Many of the suspects also had prominent Grim Reaper or Santa Muerte tattoos. And significantly, a common method in these killings was slitting the victims' throats, a method often associated with ritual sacrifice.
Oh, Chicago, too. Any other examples?
There's another Texas incident, this time further south in the Rio Grande Valley. In Sullivan City, Texas, in September 2011, a man was found murdered, stabbed, and then burned to death. His body was discovered right next to a shed on the property. Inside that shed, a Santa Muerte shrine complete with lit candles. Again, the proximity of the shrine to the brutal murder scene strongly suggested a ritual connection.
So how many confirmed Santa Muerte ritual homicides have there been in the U.S. total?
Based on the available open-source reporting and law enforcement acknowledgments reviewed for this, there seem to be about 4 documented incidents where Santa Muerte ritualism was strongly indicated or confirmed as a factor in a U.S. homicide. 3 of those are generally cited as confirmed.
4 incidents might not sound like a huge number statistically.
Exactly. Compared to overall homicide rates, it's small. But here's the context that makes law enforcement deeply concerned. U.S. federal agencies now openly acknowledge that Mexican cartels maintain a presence, operations in over 1,000 U.S. cities.
Or 1,000 cities.
Yes. So when you have even a handful of confirmed cases of homicide driven by a belief system that rationalizes killing as a pathway to spiritual power and immunity occurring within organizations that have such a vast national footprint, that pattern, even if small now, signals a profoundly dangerous new layer of criminal activity. It requires specialized understanding and vigilance.
It's clear the appeal of Santa Muerte, especially in its darker forms, is complex.
Yeah.
It's not just about spirituality. It's tied into the social fabric, isn't it?
Absolutely. You have to understand the societal context, particularly in Mexico and parts of Central America, where her following is strongest. For many devotees, especially the non-criminal ones, her appeal comes partly from this deep-seated perception that the official system, the government, the economy, even sometimes the established church, is fundamentally corrupt or indifferent. They see a system based on wealthy patrons and political connections, leaving a vast, disenfranchised underclass stuck in poverty, feeling powerless and ignored.
So they look elsewhere for help.
Exactly. They seek comfort, power, maybe a sense of justice or control outside of these mainstream institutions that they feel have failed them. Santa Muerte offers a direct line, a spiritual contract that bypasses the state, bypasses the official church hierarchy.
And her message resonates with that feeling of being left behind.
In a way, yes. Her very image, death, constantly highlights the ephemerality of life. Life is short, often brutal, especially if you're poor or involved in dangerous activities. So instead of focusing solely on salvation in the afterlife, like traditional Catholicism, Santa Muerte devotion often implicitly endorses making the most of the here and now.
How so?
It can be interpreted as validating pleasure-seeking behavior, the pursuit of personal gain, enjoying life's riches now because death is coming for everyone anyway. It provides a kind of spiritual justification for choices, whether relatively benign ones like seeking luck, or criminal ones like seeking wealth through illicit means that doesn't rely on the approval of the state or the church. It's a response to inequality and precariousness.
There was that quote you mentioned earlier from a devotee named Juan Carlos. It seemed to capture that normalization of death.
Yes, it's very stark and revealing. He said simply, "We will all look like this someday. All of us are going to meet La Santa Muerte." For followers like him, the figure isn't just something to pray to. She's an active physical reminder of mortality.
And it helps them cope.
Paradoxically, yes. By confronting death daily, by making it familiar through the image of the saint, they believe they can combat the fear of the inevitable. It's like injecting just enough controlled death, the symbol, the rituals, into their daily lives to somehow ward off its premature or unexpected arrival. It's a psychological coping mechanism for living in dangerous or unpredictable circumstances.
But that same psychological shield, when adopted by criminals, has huge implications for public safety.
Massive implications. This is why U.S. law enforcement agencies, from local police up to federal task forces, absolutely must remain highly vigilant about this phenomenon. The rise of this criminalized faith isn't just another aspect of organized crime. It adds a layer of motivation and justification that's profoundly dangerous.
How does it change things for investigators?
The presence of Santa Muerte artifacts at a crime scene, or in a suspect's possession, becomes a massive investigative clue. It's not just religious paraphernalia, it's potential evidence of motive, affiliation, and even future intent.
What kind of artifacts are most significant?
We're talking about altars, obviously. But also the specific colored candles used, as we discussed, they indicate intent. Finding bowls with blood residue, animal bones, specific herbs known to be used in curses. Even smaller, seemingly mundane objects can be telling. Things like burned plastic figurines of police officers found on an altar suggest petitions against law enforcement. Black statuettes of Santa Muerte are often associated with darker intentions, like revenge or harm. These artifacts provide immediate, crucial insight into the spiritual orientation, the mindset of the suspects, arrestees, and sometimes even potential victims. They tell a story.
So officers need training to read these signs.
Specialized training is essential. First responders and investigators need to be able to recognize the ritualistic nature of these crime scenes. They must be able to look at an altar and make an informed assessment. Is this likely a benign setup for seeking love or money-red candles, maybe fruit offerings? Or does it indicate petitions for harm or protection for criminal acts, black candles, blood, bones, weapons perhaps? The difference in assessing the threat level and the suspect's likely motivations is vast. Are you dealing with someone asking for luck or someone asking for immunity after committing murder?
You mentioned earlier this can be stressful for officers.
Extremely stressful. Dealing with the gruesome reality of cartel violence is hard enough. Adding this layer of dark spirituality, human sacrifice, desecration, it takes a heavy psychological toll. Sources involved in law enforcement training on Santa Muerte have reported that the material, the crime scene photos, the case studies can be so confronting, so spiritually disturbing, that some officers actually become physically ill during the training. Some have even passed out. It underscores that this is not a typical crime scene investigation. It requires not just tactical training, but a degree of psychological and, frankly, almost spiritual armor for officers to process and investigate effectively without being overwhelmed or traumatized by the sheer darkness of it.
So bringing it all together,
Yeah.
what's the most dangerous element here? The core threat.
For me, the most profound and ultimately darkest element of this whole spiritual insurgency is that promise of immunity. The core belief embedded within the most violent criminalized interpretation of the faith.
The belief that sacrifice makes them untouchable.
Precisely. This belief system fundamentally weaponizes death itself, turning it against the rule of law, against society. It offers its adherents the ultimate rationalization for homicide. Kill for the sane, make the right sacrifices, and she will shield you from consequences, both legal and mortal.
Which leads to a terrifying final thought.
It does. If the core motivation driving the most violent actors in this conflict is the deeply held spiritual belief that killing, that human sacrifice, grants them literal immunity from arrest, from prosecution, from bullets, from death itself, what does that mean for the future? What does that mean for the next phase of the drug war, or for law enforcement trying to contain it, when your enemy genuinely believes, as an article of faith, that they are literally untouchable? How do you fight an enemy who believes death itself is on their side?
We have peeled back the terrifying curtain today on a spiritual insurgency that uses ancient fears and modern brutal violence as its weapons. The Santa Muerte cult, at least in its darkest, narco-cultura-fueled form, seems to represent the ultimate chilling rationalization for homicide. And the battle lines, often drawn in blood and marked by these cryptic, chilling altars, are now clearly undeniably drawn on both sides of the border. It's a darkness we need to understand to even begin to confront.
Okay, so we hope you liked our today's discussion. For more such discussions, subscribe to our channel, Phantom Homicide.